This meeting is open to the public and is available through an online platform. Please subscribe to the Township of Wilmot YouTube channel to watch the live stream or view after the meeting. Delegations must register with the Information and Legislative Services Department. The only matters being discussed this evening will be those on the agenda. Need a motion, recommendation that council reconvene in open session at 7 o'clock. Moved by Councillor Fisher, second by Councillor Hallman. All in favor? That is carried. Thank you. Good evening and thank you for joining us. I would like to take a moment and ask that we all reflect on the importance of this week. With Thursday being Remembrance Day, a time to honor all veterans, and today having been Indigenous Veterans Day. On behalf of my fellow colleagues, I want to thank each of our veterans for the sacrifice they made for our country. Councillor Hallman, would you read the land acknowledgement, please?
We appreciate this place because it's where we call home. We're thankful for the rolling hills, forests, farmland, and water. Today, we honor all of those who have served to protect Turtle Island, also known as Canada. Over 12,000 Indigenous people volunteered to serve in all three wars. 7,000 First Nations, and 300 died during these conflicts. During these times, they were not able to vote, did not speak the settler language of English, and it wasn't until 1995 that Indigenous people were not allowed to lay a wreath at a Remembrance Day ceremony. With that said, this will be happening for the first time on Thursday by a local Indigenous veteran alongside his son, who is still serving today. So this land acknowledgement is different tonight to reflect and pay respect to that this evening. Thank you, and miigwech.
Are there any additions to the agenda? Seeing none. At this point, that the recommendation that the agenda as presented for November 8th, 2021 be adopted. That is moved by Councillor Fenning, Councillor Gerber. All in favor? That is carried. Thank you. Is there any disclosure of pecuniary interest under the Municipal Conflict of Interest Act? Seeing none. Next item is the recommendation that the minutes of the following meetings be adopted as presented. Regular council meeting October 18th, 2021. That is moved by Councillor Hallman, Councillor Fisher. Are there any corrections, omissions, errors? Seeing none, all in favor? That is carried. Thank you. So the first item is the presentation for the third ice path location study. Ms. Jackson.
Thank you, Mayor. I'm just wondering if we can have Mr. Desai let into the room. There he is. You can turn your camera on and if you like. There we go.
Hello, everyone.
Thank you. Thank you. So thank you. Thank you, Mayor Armstrong, members of council. It's my pleasure to introduce Anand Desai from Monteith Brown Planning Incorporated. Monteith Brown has been working with the township for many years, developing first the Parks and Recreation Master Plan, and over the past couple of years, helping us plan for expansion of our ice surfaces. So in October 2020, Council approved Monteith Brown's recommendation from their indoor arena usage and needs analysis update, indicating that a third ice pad be provided in Wilmot in the short term to meet current and future needs from population growth. And as a follow-up from that study, Monteith Brown's contract was extended to complete the follow-up study to determine how a third rink can be delivered and where it should be located. So tonight's staff report and consultant presentation is a preliminary report with a focus on the preferred site for a third rink in Wilmot Township based on group consultation, the site tours completed by Monteith Brown, and the background work that they've been doing. So before I give away any more of Anand's thunder, I will gladly turn it over to you for your presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Sandy, and great lead up. So I appreciate that, Mr. Mayor. Members of council, thank you very much for having me. Oh, good. I was about to pull up the presentation, so I'll just let whoever's clicking advance us to the next slide, please. So just as context as well, so as Sandy mentioned, Monteith Brown Planning is leading this study. This time we are being supported by Cornerstone Architecture and Wickens Green Space Consultants. They our consulting team as a whole are involved in the analysis of two key studies. As the director of Parks and Facilities had just mentioned, the genesis of this planning process goes back even before the Parks, Facilities, and Recreation Services Master Plan, which did in fact recommend a third ice pad, but also further study as to the location. So in October, hard to believe it was over a year ago, that we were in front of you all with the update to the indoor arena usage and needs analysis, which again demonstrated the fact that there is pent-up demand for ice time and arenas in Wilmot. And council at that time had directed staff and ourselves to undertake further studies, specifically looking at the locations, potential locations for that ice pad. And given that the township's 10-year capital budget had separately identified the need to plan for a new Parks and Facilities Operations Center, it's presently housed at the back of the WRC at the moment. There were logical synergies in terms of the analysis and the site selection that would be undertaken. And so Cornerstone Architecture and Wickens Green Space are assisting in those elements as part of our team. Next slide, please. I was trying to click. Sorry. So the purpose really of the location studies is to determine where the third ice pad is best suited. And that it was pretty clear again through the master plan and then subsequent analyses that the options most feasibly would be through expanding the WRC, recommissioning the new Hamburg Community Center, or selecting a new site if either of the two existing arenas were deemed not to be suitable for expansion or recommissioning. And with respect to the parks operations, it's looking at how the Parks Operations Center is functioning at the WRC, in light of any kind of constraints. Apologize, there's a spelling mistake there. So in light of current constraints, future growth needs, and an ability to deliver efficient, cost-effective services. Next slide, please. So the study methodology is organized largely in two key phases. Being in phase one right now, we have undertaken some research, engaged arena users. I'll get into that in a moment. Gone on site to review the conditions and review all the various building condition assessments that have been prepared in the past. Through that first phase, we have prepared a preliminary findings report, which summarizes the work to date, outlines the operational needs of the Parks and Facilities Division, and recommends a preferred option for the WRC. And really the intent of today is to present you with our opinion of the preferred option, to gain your input as council and test support for that option with stakeholders and the public before we move on to conceptual plans and costing for those facilities. And then reporting back to you in early 2022. Next slide, please. And so the first set of slides will take us through the arena portion of the studies. Next slide, please. So it was important to continue the dialogue that we started with your various arena users, all again, back to the master plan, but again, as recent as last year. The major arena users were all engaged and they all contributed valuable feedback. In addition to the major ice and dry floor users, we were engaging the community players as part of this process because they are a tenant of the new Hamburg Community Center. We engaged the Wilmot Soccer Club. Although they don't necessarily use a lot of indoor space, they are an important stakeholder and a major user of the fields outside of the WRC. So we wanted to obtain a well-rounded perspective from the people that use the arena the most. The arena's users were all very appreciative, as maybe you're not surprised, of Council's willingness to consider that third ice pad moving forward, and indicated that the WRC was their preferred location, largely on the basis of its central location. The fact that there's already multiple pads there makes it very efficient and convenient for their programming and scheduling. They did identify the New Hamburg Arena as their secondary preference, though some suggested if we expand the WRC, perhaps there still is a future ice use for the NHCC as a practice rink or potentially as a dryland training facility. All groups, though, in terms of a new ice pad, support an NHL regulation ice pad. Current arena practices really build to that specification. And both ice pads at the WRC are of that dimension already. And so that would be supported by a minimum of 6 dressing rooms. A seating of a typical community rink, they didn't clearly need another event bowl, for example. You have that already. So it would be pretty standard seating, and they emphasize storage for equipment and other things that they have in their possession. In terms of the community players, again, while they don't necessarily use the ice floor per se, they are making use of the New Hamburg Community Center, and they identified certain constraints to us with respect to a lack of rehearsal space, as well as again a lack of storage, a lack of a workshop that impacts their ability to deliver the types of programs that they would ideally like to. The Wilmot Soccer Club was also engaged, and we had a productive conversation with them. And so next slide, please. And so with that information in mind from the research, from the consultations, we documented existing conditions at the WRC. It's, again, in terms of a facility, it's fairly young in its life cycle, built in 2007. And it is your recreational hub. Again, no surprise there, with a number of indoor and outdoor recreational components co-located on site. Has strong access to local and regional markets via the Highway 78 corridor. And that was again mentioned as a big selling point for groups. The adjacent land uses consist of Schmidt's Woods as well as agricultural lands. And again, being a newer facility, it's in very good shape. It was designed with modern barrier-free accessibility and building code standards in mind. Next slide, please. In terms of its opportunities and constraints, the space exists to fit at least one additional ice pad, potentially requiring some reconfiguration of the parking to make that happen. We talked about the geographic access and its centrality. Since it has arena operations and multiple ice pads on site already, adding a third ice pad would retain those economies of scales and efficiencies in your arena operations. You can have less staff, less Zambonis, that kind of thing. And that's what we're referring to when we're talking about the economies of scale. Areas around the WRC are envisioned for long-term population growth and employment growth, which certainly makes it a good location for the future. The constraints, it is a busy site as it is right now. There are a number of uses, and so an ice pad or additional ice pads would certainly increase the intensity of use on the site. Depending on again, the number of ice pads and how much parking and vehicular circulation needs to be adjusted, there could be the potential to reorient or relocate one or more of the soccer fields. And again, that was something that we had discussed with the soccer club. Next slide, please. In terms of the New Hamburg Community Center, a facility of a certain vintage, let's say, built in 1948. it certainly has its character and a strong sentimental value, which we'll get into in a moment. But it is embedded within the New Hamburg settlement area, adjacent to residential areas and Norm S. Hill Park. A portion of that park site is in a floodplain. The building condition assessment that was conducted a few years back did find the facility to be in fair to good condition. But again, as an older building, it was designed to a different standard. In 1948, they weren't thinking about the same level of accessibility for persons with disabilities as we do today. Next slide, please. So in terms of those opportunities, again, what we've heard through the previous study and the master plan, and this time around in talking to the groups, there is a sentimental value among certain folks in your community. It does provide a level of service directly in the New Hamburg settlement. But there, as you can see by the list, there are a number of constraints there. Groups just emphasized how challenging parking can be, and the addition of ICE back into that facility could, again, exacerbate that situation. It is a smaller than regulation rink, which for maybe older folks like me, it's nice when you don't have to huff and puff across a big ice surface. But when it comes to tournaments and things like that, it may not meet all of the needs or your ability to attract tournaments or program that requires that regulation size. It has 4 change rooms, I believe, which by modern standards really put some constraints on females, for example. If for girls hockey, ideally you need that 6 minimum change rooms. It has certain site constraints, basically the size, the grading, there's a slope, and its floodplain constraints. You as a council are very progressive in your environmental mindset and energy efficiency and climate change resiliency. Older building systems in a facility like this may require significant reinvestment if it were to be energy efficient, and some may not even be possible. Single pad arenas do not generate those same economies of scale. You need to have a Zamboni over there. You need to have staff over there, directly supervising it. So you wouldn't have the same as if it were co-located with the others. And previous studies that you had commissioned prior to the pandemic estimated up to $6.5 million, which would include a dressing room expansion, some new mechanical systems, and selected building improvements. I would caution that that 6.5 million would appear to be perhaps a little bit out of date. The pandemic has certainly escalated costs. In speaking to some architects, pre-COVID budgets are being increased as much as 40%. Not to say that that's the case here, but when you factor in that kind of COVID reality, along with the fact that your previous concepts didn't include a number of other mechanical, structural, or functional enhancements, it might be reasonable to believe that reinvestment in the New Hamburg Community Center arena could almost cost the same as a new arena altogether. Next slide, please. And so the next set of questions or slides, we'll get through the parks operations component. The next slide, please. So right now, parks and facility staff are using a workshop and a break room inside the WRC that was originally designed for arena staff. So arena staff are largely working in a corridor, and park staff are in that workshop space. There is a small fenced area on the north where you can have some secured storage of materials and equipment, largely equipment. And then there is an unsecured aggregate storage area to the north as well, where you keep like the mulch and whatnot. And then there's a shared laneway really off the entranceway that runs behind the rink on that north side in the aquatic center. So that laneway is shared between park staff and the public. Next slide, please. So from a parks operations center analysis, its opportunities at the WRC in its current location is some of the opportunities are very much the same as with the rink. The centralized location and strong access to local transportation via the highway corridors are really beneficial for your staff to minimize the travel time. You have staff at all levels together on one site, so there's good communication. But really, the amount of space that parks and facility staff are working with right now is inadequate for their current and their future needs. The size of the workshop limits its efficiency, the efficiency of staff. The township has been faced with theft and vandalism in recent years, largely from some unsecured areas there. So, that is a bit of a challenge. Well, it is a challenge. The shared laneway creates certain conflicts when the public is zooming by and you have parks and facilities fleet using that same space. Again, if we were to look at expansion of any kind of work operations yard, it could require some relocation of the soccer fields in order to accommodate that. Next slide, please. So in terms of the site evaluation, we feel that the area to the east where the mini soccer fields presently are would have potentially sufficient space for a building and storage, but again, would require relocation of those minis. The two undeveloped areas by the entrance off Nafziger, again, would potentially create sufficient space, but again, traffic conflicts as your premier recreation destination, aesthetically an operations yard might not be the vision one would want to introduce to the site. The area to the north is really constrained in terms of Schmidt's Woods. In any scenario of where an operation center could fit, it would be unlikely to accommodate any kind of joint operations between different municipal departments. So, for example, we see certain municipalities combining parks and facilities operations with roads, for example, or transit. The latter doesn't apply necessarily to you folks. Next slide, please. So really, to conclude the presentation, we offer two preliminary directions. The first is to construct a third ice pad by way of expanding the Wilmot Recreation Center, designed and oriented in a manner that allows the township to construct a potential fourth ice pad if it's required in the future. We would like to be proactive in that sense. And on that basis, should Township Council support the third ice pad at the Wilmot Rec Center, really it would have to assemble new lands to construct a new Parks and Facilities Operations Center, because again, we do not feel that both could fit on the site. Next slide, please. So our next steps are to seek your feedback on the presentation, on the report that was included as part of your agenda package. Seek your approval, as noted in Director Jackson's staff report, about going out to the public for a 2-week commenting period to gain thoughts on support for the WRC. And then we would be proceeding with the conceptual plans and cost estimates that we would then come back to council in early 2022 with a final report about where we see the ideal locations for the arena, as well as the Parks and Facilities Operations Center. So I believe that's the end of my slide deck. Next slide, if you wouldn't mind, but I believe that's the last slide. Yes. So with that, I'm pleased to take any questions of council at this time.
Councillor Hallman.
Thank you, through the mayor. Thank you for that presentation. It was excellent. So as you know, we have committed to a 50 by 30, and I'm deeply proud of this commitment. One of the things that I'm exploring while I weigh all these items is it possible to looking at being a leader in a lead building with this and what you're presenting? So maybe I'll just start with that question and see who can answer that for me.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, I think I can, if I understand your question, Councillor Hallman, and sorry through you, Mr. Mayor. Again, you as a township are very ambitious and progressive in your mindset moving forward. Again, if I'm understanding kind of the 50 by 30, like we want to look at maximizing the use of a site, I believe is what you're driving at. And so, we know that their arenas are tough. I mean, they're large and they're wide. And we have seen in the past, not too often, some municipalities explore, is there the potential to stack or build vertically? So some recreation components. From an arena standpoint, I'm not aware of anyone that has actually pursued that provincially or even nationally. I know the city of Toronto looked at it years ago, but they found it was expensive. I mean, the concrete is very heavy. But again, it's not to say, if you have a commitment, whether it's LEED or net zero, or again, how a building is organized, when we get to the detailed design stage, you as a township, you can certainly explore those and you'll have a sense of what the cost of that more sustainable approach is, what the cost of a baseline is, and you can make a decision in terms of the payback and if that represents a good investment to you as a township. I hope I was getting at the right thing there, Councillor Hallman.
Yes, thank you. And you did address, sorry, through the mayor, just a follow-up. You did address my question, which was, looking at the future of the municipality again, and with this idea of, potentially needing a fourth ice rink. And, I'm aware that it is not going to be, it's not cheap. So, do we look at considering asking in this further next step report, should this pass this evening, of what it would like to stack, and then what layers can we address now financially in preparation for that? These are questions that I have as this process unfolds, and I guess I would be wanting to know how my fellow colleagues feel about that, because to me, with this ambitious commitment to 250 by 30 and looking at, supporting youth sports in our community, these come at a cost. So what does this look like, and how do we address that? So exactly as you said with the LEED building and net zero, this is something that absolutely I am passionate about. And I think that, these kinds of facilities, they use energy. And what is nice about this location is we have the pool. So how does this look? Can we address this for the health of this recreational facility going forward? So those are kind of the biggies for me that I would like to be added. So I see Director Jackson has her in, so I'm not sure if it was to address my comment before I step out of the queue here.
Yes, if that's okay. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I think that just to support what Mr. Desai said, really anything can be investigated and looked at from a design perspective. It really is about how much council wants to invest in a facility to make it as green as possible. There are some other synergies with keeping the rink at the complex location, and that really is that we've got a large lobby already. So there's ways to manage the design so that you're not adding, whereas a new location, you're adding a whole new footprint for all of those pieces. You're also adding staff rooms, potentially larger mechanical spaces. With this site being considered as the preferred site, we can take a look at the existing refrigeration plant, see whether or not there's a way to look at replacing it with something that can manage all three rinks, or a potential fourth rink. We can look at all kinds of ways to grab that heat energy that arenas are so notorious for producing, use it to heat change rooms and lobbies and things like that. In the new space, it would be more difficult to adjust an existing building you just wouldn't have the mechanical systems in place, but certainly the new space could all be heated, and you could look at other ways to really generate efficiencies through design. And that's another benefit of looking at this site versus the New Hamburg Community Center site, which is poorly insulated. Would require a lot of work to get it to be as green as a new space can be. So I hope that kind of helps support what Mr. Desai was saying with respect to the potential for this location and what we can look at.
Yes, I agree. Our staff have always, whenever we're looking at anything, any additions or anything, they're always in the back of their minds is the green stuff. So I think our staff have been trying really hard to add that into their programs. Mr. Kelly, you wanted to add something to that?
Yeah, actually, just thank you, Your Worship, just directly off what you said and maybe some additional background. I know some members of council that were around close to or when the first phase of the rec complex went in and the second phase. And the word lead being used a lot during this conversation caught my attention. If you will recall, or if you were part of that process, a lot of the building and its original build was based on lead standards and lead practices. We saved about, and Anon, you'd probably better know the number now, but we saved about $120,000 to $150,000 by not getting the plaque on the wall that says this is a lead building. We put in a lot of the practices that lead buildings have without going through, and that's not to say that there wouldn't be more, but it's a significant cost savings to just put in sustainable practices and lead standard practices without obtaining the actual certification. So I just thought I'd point that out there with the finance hat on.
Thank you. Councillor Gerber.
Yes, thank you, Mayor Armstrong, and thank you for the presentation as well. Just a couple thoughts and questions. One would be, I mean, I know you mentioned sort of consultations with soccer. To me, reconfiguring to the point where where soccer is sort of losing a central location for a potential fourth ice pad 10 to 15 years down the road. Like, to me, if there's an accommodation for a third ice pad with a minimal impact on soccer, I think, to me, that would sort of be a direction to go. The fourth one sort of caught me a little bit by surprise, but not to say at some point it won't be needed, and I know what the projections show, but I think a good decade of showing that we are still bucking the trends as far as minor hockey in general, which I believe we probably will, but you don't want to maybe get too far down the road. And I noticed a couple comments on seating in a potential third pad. I would be thinking it would just, like, when it's talking bleacher seating, those are just like bleachers on the floor, right? Like would be at the second, like at the Doherty pad and the other pads at rim. Yeah, because any sort of a bowl or seating in a third pad would be, okay, I see we're on the same page for that. Okay, appreciate that. And then just thinking about the Parks and Recs facility, again, the WRC seems such a logical location for that. Is there any thought to, utilization? Like, I don't know where we're at right now, where we're going to be post-pandemic as far as utilization of the upstairs space at WRC. The various meeting room spaces, the senior center downstairs, the youth center, a couple other meeting rooms that are sort of, maybe smaller, but and then perhaps maybe one of those existing uses at the WRC makes sense somewhere else in order to accommodate, the staff component at the WRC. So those are just a few, maybe more observations rather than questions. But Ms. Jackson, I see that you got some thoughts on that, and then I think I maybe just have one other thought.
Sorry, thank you. Am I okay, Mr. Mayor?
Go ahead.
Thank you. Just wanted to clarify a little bit with respect to the staffing. It is really the Parks Department who are the operational portion. They need locker rooms, they need lunch space, they need areas where they can construct things. Difficult to do that on the second floor of that space. If it was really just office space we were looking for, that would actually make some sense. But unfortunately, we really need construction space and space to store gravel and mulch and all the things and all of the equipment, the trucks, etc. And we have had a rash of vandalism in behind that facility with respect to our vehicles. So somewhere to lock the vehicles up. So it's more an outdoor space with an indoor component that supports the staff, if that helps clarify a little bit.
Yeah.
Yeah, and if I might supplement that, Mr. Mayor, one of the things with the operations center as well is just like ice pads. I mean, you want to position that level of service for the future and the ability for that area to grow with your population and increase service requests. And so we don't really, again, see room for both arenas and operation centers to be able to do that collectively on the same site. I will say with the soccer, fields that you just raised, Councillor Gerber, certainly, you don't want right now. The outdoor fields are used by the groups, and they value it for the same reasons that the ice users value the two arenas. The multi-field programming potential is really efficient for them, and so one would anticipate that should a field be relocated, ideally, one would look to all other locations in the township to replace that. And again, down the road, if there's potential to acquire parkland through Planning Act dedications, use of development charges, to again create a multi-field complex, if the multi-field nature of the WRC is no longer possible, I think that would be something that one would want to consider at that time.
Super. Okay. No, yeah, I appreciate the clarification on the indoor-outdoor elements of an operations center. And I guess just a closing thought would be, to me, one of the things that going in this direction does, I mean, we've always sort of wondered, okay, what's, the old arena location? To me, this sort of frees up the discussion around sort of the future of that building. I know we have local theater, groups that love using this space and would use more of it than they could. Maybe there's an opportunity for a smaller art center in that space that's more permanent, as well as an operations center. Like that's a huge, it's a huge area under a roof and a large area outside of that facility as well, which is also sort of central to parks and operations. I mean, they do a lot of work at Normouse Hill and things like that as well. So I think that's an exciting conversation looking forward. Is, hey, we've got this other sort of sentimental, as you mentioned, site that a lot of us really love using, and what could the community continue to benefit and use that space for? And I think once we decide that the third ice pad is going to be somewhere else, it sort of opens up a lot of other opportunities for what to put under that roof that can help the community in a lot of different ways. So thanks for opening the door to that as well.
Okay. Thank you, Councillor Gerber. Councillor Fenning.
Thank you, through you, Mayor Armstrong. Thank you for this report. It's really interesting, exciting to contemplate the future of sports and development in our community. It makes a lot of sense to me, just logically, that adding to the existing facility at the rec center would be efficient and offer us an opportunity to perhaps implement some of those green technologies that we don't have currently. And, especially when we're looking at long-term. So I echo the comments that Councillor Hallman made, being part of the sustainability committee, and if Ashton were here, he could speak to it a heck of a lot better than I can about the carbon budgeting and how that might apply to the process we're undertaking with this. Also agree with Councillor Gerber's comments on being concerned about losing soccer fields or having to relocate them. It sounds to me like perhaps the particular types of use we're talking about for the parks and facilities space would be better suited to location with roads, when we're talking about gravel and equipment and such. I imagine, we do share some equipment between departments and could potentially do more of that if they were. So that might be, and I think, Mr. Mullenhouse is not on the call at the moment, but he might get upset at me for suggesting he have to share his space, but I think that's something that might make sense to consider as well. And sorry, go ahead.
Oh, I was going to say, I didn't want to interrupt. I thought you were finished, but we did have a conversation with Mr. Mullenhouse. So he's aware of what we are doing, and he's also looking at his own kind of space needs at the moment as well. And so we do see, certain benefits for co-locating. There are challenges as well, undoubtedly, in terms of the size of a space that one might need, but certainly those are conversations. Should you wish to explore further, you can. And I won't say too much more about the green investments that you mentioned, but apart from, we did talk. They do cost money, and we can build sustainable building systems without needing to be recognized formally through a LEED certification. I think it's the actions and spirit that are important. But they do come at a cost. But as we see, kind of current events, COP26, and just we all have a part to do in terms of how we can help build resiliency to climate change and just be more sustainable. And so, as much as there's an upfront, capital, there's also a benefit that isn't always measured in dollars and cents. There's a benefit to future generations, by some of this progressive thinking. And so it's great to have the conversation.
So just if I could, the follow-up there, I think we actually have a lot of good data in this community for how the dollars and cents actually follow the green decisions that we make. And doing the right thing is often also doing the fiscally responsible thing. So, I know that makes our director of corporate services very happy. I'm really pleased as well that this opens up a really great conversation with other groups in the community for what it might look like to imagine different uses for the New Hamburg Community Center and what had been the ice space there. Looking forward to this conversation continuing.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Gordick.
Thank you, through the mayor. We kind of hit on it a little bit before. I know that there were some conversations with the previous build that had been brought forward with regards to capturing the heat and the cooling based on, I believe, some of the practices that the Fennings use on their farm. And I'm just wondering how that would work. I mean, maybe it's too soon in the conversation, how that would work with the existing buildings that are there. Would they be attached to each other to be able to use some of those? And would there be any sort of investigations of looking at the Evo buildings in Waterloo to sort of maybe perhaps be reclaiming some of that and be net zero? Or is that just maybe too far out of reach because of the fact that it's an ice pad where the energy used for that is a little bit different than just an office building?
Yeah, through you, Your Worship, in response to the councillor's comment, certainly we would envision that the buildings would be attached, so the new addition would be a physical addition to the existing footprint. And just as Director Jackson had just mentioned, I mean, there may be opportunities to benefit from existing shared space in doing so. I think it is a bit early to get into the building systems element of this. It's important for council to just to know that we are preparing really conceptual diagrams and order of magnitude costing. The next phase, assuming you support a third ice pad at the selected location, the next logical step in your process will be the detailed drawings. And then you can work with the architect or whoever is assigned to that and, explore how heat exchange can work, how other building systems can be integrated with the existing floor plate and those kind of considerations.
Councillor Holman? You're muted.
Still muted.
Yeah.
There we go. Double clicked too quick. I'm not sure if my question is for the Director of Parks and Facilities or Corporate Services. I'm just reviewing the questions on the survey that's anticipated to go out. So I just have a follow-up with that while I'm processing this. Is it a possible idea to add another question to gauge the community's response to our commitment to the 50 by 30 and the obvious financial commitment that goes with that? I'm just wondering if that could be something is articulated, or if at the staff level you could discuss that before that's launched, should it be successful this evening. And I just wanted to clarify one more thing as well, based on the Director of Corporate Services comment on making sure I'm just comprehending something correctly. So if something is, we can still make all the actions toward what would be recommendations through LEAD, but we would not officially be able to say our 3 ranks are under that umbrella. I see the director nodding. Okay, great. Thank you for clarifying that.
We can, sorry, through you, Mayor Armstrong, we can tell people our ranks are LEAD standard, but we can't put a sign up that says they are. If
Okay,
that makes
thank you.
sense.
Yes, that clarifies that for me. Okay, great. I have all the info I need to make my decision tonight. Thank you.
Director Jackson, do you need to speak before Councillor Fisher?
Thank you. I just wanted to circle back to Councillor Holman's comment about the question. That might be premature right now to speak to the 30-50. We really want to focus on location for this piece, and there will be future opportunities to take a look at design when we get into more detailed design and opportunities to determine which direction we want to go as far as how deep into the green aspect. So I just feel like it might be premature without more information to back that up, if that makes sense. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Fisher.
Through you, Mayor Armstrong, and thank you, Mr. Desai, for the presentation tonight. One of my questions was answered, where the 3rd ice pad would be located. So it would be attached to the building, I'm presuming. So the 4th one would be taking over some of the soccer fields. Okay. And I know you had discussed on your presentation that costs would be coming later. Do you have your crystal ball out to a ballpark what we might be looking at?
Oh, it's a dangerous situation.
Putting you on the
Mr.
spot.
Mayor. Always asking about costs. I will say this, Councillor Fisher, and I'm getting that from Director Jackson, but just as a ballpark, and even though this is a recorded web stream, I know it might come back, but generally what we were seeing pre-COVID, a single pad arena was somewhere in the $10 to $12 million range. And so it might not be that same number because we wouldn't be building, again, by attaching to an existing building, you wouldn't need to duplicate certain space. So, but yes, that number will come. You know, our architects have done a number of green building designs. And so we'll certainly pass on the feedback from council today about that, and maybe that's something they can explore as well. But I would also also reiterate, you know, that 4th ice pad. This study's really focused on the 3rd, and let's build the 3rd and see if we can, you know, pick up enough demand in there before we decide on a 4th. But yes, I mean, if you think about the existing arena and kind of building southwards, that's the way we would see the footprint going.
Okay. And just one last question, if I can. I know Wellesley, they share their ice rink with the curling. Have you heard of that before? And,
We
and
have.
I find it kind of interesting because there's a lot of dead time throughout the day. And it just seems kind of logical if we could to have seniors come in and play throughout the day, extra financials and stuff like that. So I don't know if you ever heard of that before.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, very infrequently do we see that. Curling requires they pebble the ice. And so really you're rebuilding the ice. So if once it's pebbled for curling, you're keeping it as curling for like a week, right? Like, because otherwise there's always constant changeover of the ice. So we don't see a lot of curling combined with a traditional ice rink. We're actually not seeing a lot of municipalities investing in new curling facilities either. It's largely a sport that it has localized popularity, but generally on the nationals, or at least on the provincial stage, the participation isn't what it used to be. And so we're not really seeing a lot of investment, at least on the municipal side, into curling sheets. I hope that helps.
Yeah, and a friendly reminder, Councillor Fisher, is that when we went through the whole process to build the WRC, it wasn't until we came down to voting on the final design and the go-ahead that finally somebody said, "Oh, what about curling?" That was the time frame that showed the interest in a curling rink, because nobody mentioned it until the 12th hour. So, Councillor Gordick.
I'm going to pass that to Ms. Jackson, and then I'll come back because I believe she wanted to reference something before.
Okay.
Thank
Sounds
you,
fair.
Councillor Gordick. Thank you, Mayor Armstrong. Just wanted to circle back to the impact on soccer just for a quick second, and not stating anything officially, but it may not just be a fourth rink that could impact, it may be the parking requirements. So that will all be part of the analysis when you look at the third rink. We have to make sure we have adequate parking that meets the current Planning Act. So that could have an impact on soccer as well. I just want to make sure we're being very transparent here about the potential impacts, and it's not necessarily just a fourth rink. And I would also like to comment on Councillor Fisher's question about curling. There is an example in Tavistock where there's a single pad rink and there's two curling pads attached to the same building. They share the ice, or they share the refrigeration system, I believe. And that could be a synergy that could work. But it is very true that to have ice used as curling, it really doesn't work unless you're really trying to provide an opportunity for perhaps high school kids to try throwing a curling rock, but not really taking curling seriously to do it on a regular ice rink. You have a figure skating group in the morning that gouges up the ice, and then you're trying to get it ready for curling would be very challenging. But you could attach it to a rink if there was a demand and a desire as an option. Thank you.
Yeah, I believe Plattsville has curling attached to its rink in Plattsville. Okay, Councillor Gordick.
Thank you, through you, Mayor. So going back to the questions, and maybe this might be for Ms. Jackson, is are those the way the questions are going to go out? Because I feel that the fourth question is a little too open-ended. I know it's only going to be a short survey time, but where it's saying preferred location, will it actually say like 1, New Hamburg Community Center, 2, Wilmot Rex Complex, and then 3 other? Or, because to me, your comments on the preferred location, is that based on us recommending the Wilmot Family Resource, the rec complex as our preferred option? Like, I'm just trying to understand question number 4.
Sure, through the mayor. That is really about supporting the recommendation coming from the consultant, and also, you know, the recommendation on the report supports the public consultation to explore that. So if we give them option A, B, and C, it becomes a vote. We're really interested in the feedback and the information from the community. Their sentiment is going to come out towards the New Hamburg Community Center. We know that, but also some of the things that we've talked about the benefits of having it there, and there could be constraints or thoughts that we haven't thought of that the community might bring forward. So it really is about looking at what Monteith Brown has come forward with a recommendation for as a preferred site, which is fully supported by the executive members of the minor sport groups that they interviewed. When they interview minor sport groups, it is the executive they're speaking to, however. So we really want to make sure that we do that general public consultation so that they have a voice as well. And we don't really have our new consultation plan in place yet, but we felt it was important to provide that opportunity for a short-term 2 weeks time frame to get that feedback. So that's the intent.
Councillor Fenning.
Thank you. Through you, Mayor Armstrong. When we're talking about the parking potentially impacting the soccer fields as well, I think it might, and I realize this is going to cost more. So maybe the Director of Corporate Services wants to take a walk, but talking about perhaps adding levels to parking so that we could not have to essentially make more efficient use of our footprint, and that I'd like to see that at least considered as an option.
And if I might, Mr. Mayor,
Yep.
In addition to the parking, one thing that we heard from the user groups as well was just traffic circulation in general for the site. When the Firebirds are playing, for example, and the visiting team is pulling up, I mean, their bus takes up the whole lane sometimes. When you have an arena program, an aquatic program, other uses happening in the older adult and the youth focused areas, the circulation, especially by the entranceway, can be challenging. And so in addition to looking at the added parking requirements, there will be a need to also rethink how traffic in general will flow efficiently and safely through that site. I believe you're on mute, Mr. Mayor.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, we have to think about that because currently the flow of traffic is thought to be a thoroughfare from Gingrich Road right through to Knapsinger. So we have to be careful because the ministry had designated that as an emergency route. So we have to make sure that people realize that they're coming into a park, and a lot of people don't, because I know when we first opened it up, somebody complained that the speed limit coming off of Gingrich Road came down to 40 kilometers, and they said it shouldn't be because it's a street, it should be 60 or whatever. So they didn't realize that when I explained it was a driveway into a playground, they kind of backed off on the idea, but some people just don't see that. So, Ms. Jackson.
Thank you, Mayor. Just to circle back just briefly with respect to the soccer fields, we will do everything. If there's any impact with the soccer, we will do it in full consultation with minor soccer users. And if we were even to consider having to relocate, we would be looking at grabbing a grouping of fields like the mini pitches, for example. So there would be strategies considered for sure. And that was why we had Mr. Desai meet with soccer before this report came out. We wanted to make sure they were fully aware of what was going in the report, and working with those groups is critical to success all around for this project. So thank you.
Very good. Thank you. And I see no further questions. Did you have any closing remarks, Ms. Jackson.
Thank you, Mayor. No, I just would like to thank Anand. He's been great to work with and his team, and it's been a little bit drawn out because of delays due to COVID, but we're looking forward to the next phases, and we will be back to council over the next few months to bring the next phases of the results of this work that that Monteith Brown is doing, and look forward to your further questions and input. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. And thank you, Mr. Desai. Appreciate it. Great report. Thank you. So we
Thank
have
you
a
very much.
recommendation. That recommendation is that the third ice pad location study preliminary findings summary report be received, and further that staff be directed to initiate a public consultation process to seek comments on the recommended location of the Wilmot Rec Complex for the third rink site, and further that staff be directed to present the public consultation results to council with a recommendation regarding the preferred site. That is moved by Councillor Fenning, Councillor Gerber. All in favor? That is carried. So thank you very much, and thank you again, Mr. Desai. So the next item is the consent agenda. We are now on to the consent agenda. If members of council have any questions and want to remove an item from the consent agenda, please indicate so now, and we will not take questions on consent items unless the items are requested be removed to the regular agenda. Seeing none. So the recommendation is that reports numbers ILS 2021-39, ILS 2021-40, and PFRS 2021-017 be approved. And that is moved by Councillor Gordick, Councillor Fisher. All in favor? That is carried. Thank you. We have a delegation for report 40. No, what is it? Okay, oh yeah, for the procedural bylaw, we have a registered delegation. Evening, Nigel. Welcome.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor.
You may proceed, sir.
Thank you. Good evening, Council. The Township's bylaws, including the procedural bylaw that you are reviewing today, are living documents, and I'm so pleased to see that you're open to amending them as circumstances change. As our knowledge and experience improves, so should protocols during council meetings, such as correcting the terminology that you and we, the public, used to refer to the acknowledgement that's read at the beginning of meetings. I was disappointed, however, to read the proposed changes to the time allotted for delegations. Applicants, such as those who are seeking the approval of zoning applications for gravel pits or residential subdivisions, are allowed 15 minutes to present their case. Members of the public, on the other hand, are limited to just 5 minutes each. Tonight's staff report states that 5 minutes is consistent with many other municipalities and encourages a concise, fact-based presentation. I have delegated at a regional council meeting where I was only allowed 5 minutes to speak, and I remember being grateful for the 10 minutes that Wilmot Council allowed for similar presentations. It can take time to prepare a coherent argument that builds to a conclusion, and sometimes 5 minutes simply isn't enough. Incomplete is not the same as concise, and I don't believe that restricting a presentation to 5 minutes will guarantee that it is fact-based. The report also says delegations are provided the opportunity to submit additional written materials to further expand on their concerns. But that is equally true for applicants and not just residents. I've sat through presentations where applicants have read their PowerPoint slides verbatim. My light-hearted suggestion would be to ban presentation slides that contain any words. Community engagement between residents and council is not just a matter of handing you a bunch of documents. These council meetings are opportunities for us to speak with you directly as a group. And I know that in these COVID times, that sense of connection may feel fragmented while meetings are conducted virtually. But there is a big difference between emailing you a document rather than addressing you directly in the horseshoe. The staff report suggests that when topics are being discussed and neighbours are in agreement, they should consider joint presentations. I'm not convinced that an organised single delegation should necessarily be given more weight than neighbours who appear as individuals. Even if there is repetition, doesn't that show that there is some consensus within the community? Many residents who delegate are inexperienced when it comes to presenting in public, whereas for applicants, public speaking is often part of their job. They have resources available to them, such as personnel support and a budget, whereas it may take someone who lacks those resources and experience more time to get their point across. When I appear before council as a delegation, I want to feel that I have been heard and respected as an individual and as a resident of Wilmot. That is an opportunity and a privilege that I do not take lightly. I'm asking council and staff to reconsider the distinction between how delegations by applicants and by members of the public are treated. Neither side of an issue should be given a time advantage over the other. Thank you.
Thank you, Nigel. Any questions of the delegation? Seeing none. Councillor Fenning.
Thank you, through you, Mayor Armstrong. I appreciate your comments, Nigel. I am generally in favor of this restriction to 5 minutes. And I don't think, that we're ever going to get the time limits or the constraints perfectly hammered out for each particular situation. I wonder though if when we have an applicant who's bringing something, and it's not just an applicant, oftentimes people that are presenting to council aren't necessarily presenting about gravel pit or something like that, but there can be technical aspects to presentation that would require longer than the average presentation to commenting on it. So that's one of the reasons I support it. And when we have a lot of delegations who all want to speak to a single issue, it's been challenging to manage. I'm not in favor of anything that limits people's ability to engage with council, but I think I've supported this because I think that it does strike a reasonable balance on the whole. And like you said, it is a living document, and with that in mind and with the experiences that will come as a result of this change, we may decide that we do need to address it and change it again. Not that that's something we want to change constantly, but we also want to make sure that we are learning from the experiences that we have as a result of the rules that we put in place.
Councillor Fisher.
Thank you, through you, Mayor Armstrong. I think there's a couple of things we have to think about with the procedural bylaw. Being fair to the applicant and being fair to constituents is certainly critical. People have to be able to speak and share their thoughts. And the other thing is being able to get our business done in a timely manner. And I know many times over the last probably year and a half, we've had to break curfew because we've ran over. I know once or twice we've had to defer items that we didn't have time to talk about. And that's not good either. So I did a little research, and turns out Wellesley has 10 minutes as a prescribed time. North Dumfries has 5 minutes, and Wellesley has 7 minutes. And I thought 7 minutes is kind of an interesting kind of saw it off in the middle. And I'm just wondering how my fellow colleagues would feel about something like that.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Fisher. And we're going to allow the clerk to comment on her report first.
Thank you. Through you, Mayor Armstrong. I haven't highlighted my report yet, so we'll get into that first. Tonight, Council is being asked to consider the adoption of what are essentially 3 amendments to the procedural bylaw. Whereas the change to territorial acknowledgement and the addition of clarifying language seems to be acceptable amendments to Council, the public, and staff, ongoing discussion regarding time allotments for the public continues. And understandably, as many view Council meeting delegations as the best avenue for voicing opinions and concerns. At this time, Council has received 1 piece of correspondence on this subject. Among other comments, the correspondence suggests a time limit for applicants, which staff have included in the proposed bylaw as 15 minutes. And now we have heard from Mr. Gordick as well as a registered delegation. Procedural bylaws are the governing document for the proceedings of Council and committee meetings, which, unless they are closed to the public in compliance with the Municipal Act, must be open to the public. Historically, the procedural bylaw was given very little attention from the public in Wilmot, but that is no longer the case. Whereas in numbers, very few people will comment on the bylaw, but for those who do, it is usually with purpose and passion that must be recognized. I thank both Mr. Farnan and Mr. Gordick for their comments. For the procedural bylaw, from a staff perspective, we try to balance the needs and wants of Council, the public, and staff with legislation, policy, and the guiding principles of our professions. Sometimes it is a near impossible task to provide recommendations that satisfy all parties, and ultimately, it is Council's decision. Staff's role is to make the recommendations and cite framework for arriving at the decision, which generally goes back to legislation, policy, and guiding principles. For the procedural bylaw, there's also a desire to be consistent where we can with our municipal partners throughout the region. The delegation time limit does vary between 5 and 10 minutes, mostly 5 from what we've seen. However, most recently in the Township of Wilmot, they did pass a 7-minute, which was something we haven't seen before, but it was sort of that compromise in the middle idea. So tonight, Council can decide to change the delegation time allotment again, table the discussion for another time, or remain status quo. If the decision is to table the discussion with greater community engagement, as well as discussions about processes, as was mentioned perhaps in the First Peoples Group recommendation from July 5th, this is all part of that discussion, right? How do we engage with the public? And so there's nothing wrong with this being part of that discussion, since the idea of being a delegation essentially is part of community engagement. You can't separate the two. If the decision is to table a discussion, it can, as I said, be part of that discussion, or it could also be part of the procedural bylaw review during the next term of Council. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Meadowholt. Councillor Hallman.
Thank you, through the mayor. Ms. Middleholtz, can you comment on just one thing procedurally first? Because I'm assuming, making an assumption, that perhaps the territory acknowledgement piece is not the contentious part. So can we, through process, vote on that separately from the other recommendations?
Thank you, through you, Mayor Armstrong. So, yes, we could pull them apart. What is being proposed, like the recommendation, is that, you know, the report be received for information. So the recommendation from staff at this point doesn't really specify the three different, shall we say, elements. What we're looking at is the bylaw itself, which gets approved, as you know, later in the council meeting. So it would either be, and in preparation, thankfully, Mr. Gordick did provide me with a bit of a heads up as to what was happening. This and I thanked him for that for sure. It allowed me an opportunity to, as I sometimes do, prepare the potential for amended recommendations or amended resolutions, which could, shall we say, either amend what is actually in the bylaw itself, could amend what is in the amending bylaw. So those sorts of things can be altered. If we have a further discussion, let's say, with regards and agree to table, council wants to table the idea of discussion on delegations. Okay, so for delegations to change from the 5 minutes, or to at least entertain that idea for the later discussion, that doesn't stop the bylaw from being passed, because the amending bylaw doesn't even contemplate changing the actual delegation time. So the territorial acknowledgement would go forward, the addition of applicant and the applicant time can go forward, as well as that clarifying language that was mentioned as well. It doesn't preclude there being further discussion. My thought process for saying that it'd be with the next term of council is that, quite frankly, we've done a lot of review and a lot of changes to the procedural bylaw. And in the next year, in Information and Legislative Services, there's, I'm not sure if you know this, municipal election next year. And so anyways, that's going to create a fair amount of work for us as well. And so to add on a comprehensive review of the public engagement portion of a council meeting is too significant of a review for us to take on at this time.
A follow-up, Mayor?
Thank you. Councillor Gordick.
Oh, a follow-up, Mayor?
Oh, you got a follow-up there, Councillor Holman?
Yes, thank you. Thank you for unpacking that with me, Ms. Middleholtz. The one thing I was wondering with, so that piece is, if that's to go with that. Oh, sorry. And then I now see that the CAO has raised her hand. So maybe I will wait before I unfold another layer to my question.
Ms. Chambers.
Yes, so I just wanted to confirm the recommendation tonight is just that this report be received for information. And so I don't know what the timeline was from Ms. Middleholtz to return this for final approval for council. But just to comment on the presentation tonight and council's remarks with respect to the time limit. I do agree it is a balance, and in my past experience, I have been used to the 5-minute time allotment, and I know that it is a balance between allowing delegations to be heard and certainly to be able to have sufficient time to express their opinions to council. It is related to only matters that are on the agenda, so I believe the 5-minute timeline does allow for that input, but certainly I would agree with Ms. Middleholtz's comments with respect to public engagement as a whole. And currently I see, this venue to council as being one of the limited opportunities that the public has to engage council. And going forward, I look to increase the opportunities for public engagement. Recognizing the third recommendation in the First Peoples Group report, that it would be, certainly a benefit to the public and to council to have a fulsome public engagement process with through many different platforms. And so I do want council to know that that is on my radar, and I'll be bringing forward some recommendations to council in the near future in that regard.
Go ahead, Councillor Hallman.
Thank you for the follow-up. Thank you, Ms. Chambers, for that. That was also very helpful for me. Ms. Minholz, the one thing I wanted to ask was, even though we're receiving this for information this evening, is there a way that we can articulate, to my understanding, there's always an opportunity for the public to make a request of council, I would like 10 minutes just to say it's a super important topic on the agenda. They want there to be a cajillion purple trees in Wilmot, and they just need more than 5 minutes to share their passion for purple trees. So can we put in a process into the procedural bylaw that says, here is your opportunity to reach out formally to ask for a different length of time? I'm just wondering, with listening to Councillor Fisher's saying 7 minutes, but if we make it very clear how to interact, or maybe my recommendation is better in an engagement process. I feel like part of us is like putting the cart before the horse with the public engagement process as the public and council. This is how we interact. So I'm sorry about my conjumbled wordness, but there's my question.
Ms. Minholz.
Thank you. So first of all, I would just like to put forward a clarification. The report is being received for information, but the bylaw is actually on the agenda tonight to be passed. Just for clarification, perhaps the way I do recommendations might be slightly different than some others, in that the bylaw, it's there. That's part of the report. Yes, it's in. So the report's being received for information, but the bylaw is being read for a first, second, and third time and finally passed in open council, hopefully, as a separate part of the agenda. So I word my recommendation slightly different, perhaps. So to go back to your example, and in a situation such as that, suppose a member of the public, the purple tree people, would like to have it's a more expansive topic. That is something where those people should be coming to staff and having a pre-discussion, because it is such an expansive topic that to be providing that information solely from the public without without some sort of staff report accompanying it, because financial implications need to be discussed. How does this work with regards to this strategic plan? How does this meet its trees sustainability committee? And then anyone else that needs to be tied into this as well. So it's when it's something that is so big that it's going to take more than 5 minutes for a delegation to come, it has to be tied to a staff report. Okay, it would not be able to just kind of, shall we say, land without some sort of staff report accompanying it. That is required. And I think as the township is moving forward, as we are, and I can't speak for everybody, as our commitment to community engagement is being breathed, is getting new life to it, and staff reaching out to the public where we can, and finding our way forward with that, and Ms. Chambers' guidance as we move forward, reaching out to the purple tree people right? We council or staff wanting to engage with them before a report is going to hit the plan or hit the floor, so that we know that this is coming forward. We know that this is what the community is wanting as much as possible, so that, and that's not a way of stopping delegations. That is a way of making sure that staff knows what the community is saying before we're even coming to council, so that what's coming, so it allows council an easier opportunity to make decisions, because they know that staff have already spoken with the public, and then more public can come to council and all of that. But like I said, I don't want to speak for anybody in this chamber. Says what I'm assuming are going to be brilliant ideas for community engagement and leading us forward in that discussion. We're focusing on procedural bylaw tonight and the idea of applicants being given 15 minutes. Council can change that down to 10 minutes if they want. In speaking with development services, they said 10 minutes is also sufficient. However, unfortunately, 5 minutes isn't sufficient for an applicant to describe their development. So 10 minutes, if that is council's decision, would be fine with them as well. So that's, as much as we can make this topic as big as we want and talk about community engagement as much as we want, we need to kind of just more focus down onto the idea of delegations, and making sure that it's understood. Staff wants the public input. Staff wants the public approaching us when they have these sorts of ideas, so that we can work with them in achieving a satisfactory response. Does that help? Does that answer your question?
Follow up. Thank you, through the mayor to the clerk. Thank you so much for kind of layering those for me. So the one piece that I think I should just make some time to make myself just explain it a little more thoroughly is, I'm wondering if there's a way to add wording to the procedural bylaw that, should a delegation of the public feel that 5 or 7 minutes, whatever we settle on, 10 minutes, whatever it is not sufficient, that there are steps and a process established that they can ask for, that there is no way that they can meet that time frame, and how to go about formally asking for that request. Because if 5 minutes seems to be covering it, but should an important thing come up, that we have a very clear way that the public can go read our procedural bylaw and know how to formally request that, still meeting all the necessary requirements of sending their data in, but just that it creates that space for those handful of people, I'm going to assume, that really need that time to unpack a layered topic. If maybe you can comment on that.
And certainly I can. So, I mean, ultimately, almost anything could be added to procedural bylaw. However, with that, I would feel that when we're dealing with a topic where there's considerable number of people who are wanting to address council on the matter, we would sort of be negating sort of why this was brought forward, because pretty much everyone would be asking for that extended time period of 10 minutes. So if, as Councillor Fisher was commenting on the curfew and all of that sort of we would no longer be meeting that idea of time of getting through the business of the agenda in a timely fashion. I hear you, I understand you, and I think we all want to feel and believe that almost everyone is going to really seriously think, well, can I do this in 5 minutes? Oh yeah, I think I can. Most people, not most people, many people I feel would just automatically say, oh, well, I need 10 minutes. And if that's the case, then I feel that we've sort of opened the door, that either it is the 5 minutes, the 7 minutes, the 10 minutes, what have you, and that it has to be stuck to, or there's as I said, the idea of them approaching staff about their special request, and that being a separate staff report, so that it can be addressed in a different way. And in some cases, like the I can't think of the right organization right now, but when there are things that might be brought forward, let's again, we're talking about, trees or sustainability or whatnot, the organization who is involved in that quite often will do a presentation, and then it's a staff report, much like what Monteith Brown did tonight, and doing it that way. If that's how the presentation would work. So there are lots of options already that exist, I feel, for people who have, as I said, more to say. I feel that does exist. I'm not sure if Ms. Chambers has some additional comments with regards to that, and if she wishes to address it now, or if she has other comments. I'll leave that to you, Chair Armstrong.
Ms. Chambers, you have some comments? You're muted.
Sorry, first day with the new computer. Yeah, I would just concur with Ms. Middleholtz in that if there was an issue that was more complex, we would certainly be recommending that we defer that decision and have it return with a staff report.
Okay, thank you. Councilor Gordick.
So I'm kind of listening to everybody here. So first of all, I disagree with the 15 minutes. I think that for me, the fact that, as Mr. Gordick pointed out, our applicants can have a lot more access to lawyers and legal and assistants and other people or individuals to assist them to put a slick presentation together. And so if that's the case, then I think that they can try and slick down and not have the 15 minutes. I don't think that someone has the benefits of putting together a presentation should be given more privilege than those that are coming to actually speak to that. And also, again, there are people that are uncomfortable trying to put together their thoughts and their words. I don't necessarily think that I agree with Ms. Middleholtz and Ms. Chambers that by opening the door, it's a slippery slope as to where do you decide if somebody's report is more important or their delegation is more important to their next door neighbors to give them 10 minutes and the other one's not. So then we end up basically back at what we were before. But I think we need to be equitable. And I think that while we've had two people comment tonight, Mr. Gordick and Mr. Farnan, I have heard from others that they don't feel that they're being heard by being shut up, like being told to be quiet versus an applicant having more privilege to present. I'm not sure if we go back to somehow figuring out a time frame like which was discussed before. I don't know if this is the time and the place. I know it's a living document and that Ms. Middleholtz has spent a lot of time on reviewing these and getting them to us. But maybe we do if it's a community group coming together, we do like an hour tops and divide it up. If there's 5 people that speak, then they get their 10 minutes. But if there's more and we only have an hour, then they get less if there's more people that want to speak to that topic. That might be part of it, or communication with Ms. Middleholtz, as we've all, as council, have been told to direct our delegations to Ms. Middleholtz. Then she can assist them on the proper things to do and the length of time and how many people are there. And if there's, 2 people in the same household, maybe they want to combine their thoughts and just do the delegation. How we put that into words in the bylaw, I'm not sure. And if I just feel that we should be more equitable to both sides. I disagree with the 15 minutes. And I would be probably okay with, say, 10 minutes for the applicant and 7 minutes, as Councillor Fisher suggested, for the delegations. And then work around if we have too many delegations for a particular topic, or is there something in our procedural bylaws that if we're having something specific like we did a couple pre-COVID, the gravel pit conversations where that went for quite a time, do we actually use our procedural bylaws to enact a special council meeting so that that is the topic, and we set a time frame, 7 to 9 o'clock or something like that, and then we have a special council meeting? I'd be open for that suggestion as well. But we have had some probably not normal council meetings over the last year of COVID, or last 18 months of COVID. So this may be part of an unnecessary conversation, because we may not be having those long council meetings again, because it sort of seems to be that they were a bit, you know, unusual and exceptional circumstances. But we've worked really hard, Ms. Middleholtz. I believe you worked really hard with some of the people in our community, Mr. Thomason and Mr. Farnan and others, where we weren't allowing our residents to come forward. And I feel that this is a step backwards. And I think that using the council meetings that we had that were exceptions to the rule seems almost like punishment, that we've gone so far to get people back to our council meetings than to sort of basically take that away from them. I think we have to find a middle ground. So I would like to see that 15-minute part removed and maybe make the applicants 10 minutes. So that's my thoughts, and maybe perhaps Ms. Middleholtz too can speak to some of those for me. Thank you.
You want to respond?
Yeah. Through you, Mayor Armstrong. Thank you, Councillor Gordick. So as I said, if there is a desire from council for it to be 10 minutes as opposed to 15, that is fine. And that is something that we can change. As I said, I took the opportunity to draft up a couple of amended resolutions for if council wishes to make those considerations. And I will have to say that I know that Ms. Jackson, in her time as interim CAO, she did talk about the idea of having an hour and then it being chopped up based on delegation. I haven't looked into that sufficiently, because what we have here in Wilmot currently is an opportunity for our delegations to register, provided they're not doing any sort of PowerPoint, up until a very close proximity to the council meeting itself. So as we can recall, there were, if I were to at the last minute say to people, you know, we have X many people who are attending, so therefore you all get 8 minutes. Oh, wait, no, we had somebody just register and now, or we had a bunch of people just register, so now y'all only get 4 minutes or something along those lines. So that's something that's, as I said, I'm not sure how that worked in Brantford. I believe that's where Ms. Jackson said she did that. It's not something that I'm familiar enough to recommend at this point in time. But I know people do like the capability of registering at a fairly late time for some of these topics that have more delegations at them. But certainly the idea of changing it from 15 to 10 minutes, in speaking with the Director of Development Services, he said he was that still provides sufficient comfort level for him that the applicants will be able to sufficiently address, to summarize their applications for council and the public.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Gardick and Councillor Fenning.
Thank you. Through you, Mayor Armstrong. I'm very much in favor of ensuring that the residents are able to address council. and do it in a way that makes them feel heard and respected. I think that part of the challenge is that there has been a feeling in the public here in Wilmot Township that they haven't been heard. And I think that we have taken a lot of steps to improve that, but it's going to take some time to get to where we need to be in terms of having everyone feel heard and respected. And we're going to hit some bumps along the way. I appreciate that the clerk has said the applicants could be reduced to 10 minutes, and I would support amending the recommendation to that. In thinking about it, when I'm thinking about an applicant who's bringing development, we'll say of a new development, there are a lot of questions and a lot of technical aspects that need to be described to council as well as to the public in order to effectively communicate what it is that's being proposed. And I think that that does require more time than the average delegation who would be commenting on it. With limiting it to 10 minutes, I do feel that there is then the opportunity, should we feel like we have not received sufficient information, we always have the opportunity to ask questions of the applicant following their presentation. So limiting it to 10 minutes, in my opinion, strikes a balance of enabling them to have more time than somebody who is merely commenting on it, while not making it an excessive amount of time that tips the scales. I do support staying at 5 minutes for delegations, with the caveat that we have, as a council, committed to improving our engagement and improving our communication and consultation processes in Wilmot Township. And we can't let that slide. We need to move that forward. And obviously, the clerk's office is going to have a lot on their plate this coming year, but hopefully we can move forward with that consultation and communication with the community as well. And I think that's on all of us as council and the rest of the leadership team as well. It's not just the clerk's office that works on that. We as council can support that and bring our ideas and make ourselves more available. And I know that all of us around this virtual horseshoe, as it is, are interested in serving the community, and we can serve the community best when we hear from the community. So we need to work towards finding better ways and more ways to engage and hear that voice. And I do support also the idea that we need to explore, when we have an issue where there is a lot of engagement and interest from the community, having a meeting that is dedicated to hearing that voice, whatever form that specific meeting takes, but in order to enable the community to feel heard by all of us. So I do support, to wrap it up for you, sorry. I do support limiting it to 10 minutes and would appreciate seeing that. And I do want to stick with the 5 minutes at this time.
Thank you. Councillor Hallman.
Thank you, through the mayor. I really enjoyed our discussions this evening and all the questions. This has been great to hear everyone's perspectives. And it appears that we're all coming from a different lens, and it's how this goes sometimes. If Councillor Fisher is prepared to ask for that amendment for the 7 minutes, I'm prepared to support that and second that. I'm also in favor of Councillor Fenning's recommendation for that 10 minutes for the applicant. So if I can hear from Councillor Fisher first, if he's going to continue with that recommendation, and then I'd like to support it.
Yeah, Councillor Fisher.
Yep. I would definitely put that on the table.
Okay, thank you. Councilor Gerber.
Yes, thank you. Through you, Mayor Armstrong. Yeah, I think I'm with I think the 5 minutes has been working effectively. I think one of the things, a couple things that I would highlight would be, first of all, the 15 minutes does represent a step forward in limiting the amount of time an applicant has. There didn't used to be a limit, from what I understand, and it was actually the recent correspondence we received that asked for that 15-minute limit, which sort of helps keep in check whatever unfettered resources or unfettered, advantages that the applicant might have. The other thing that I think is in play here is the applicant sort of gets their 1 15-minute slot. There could be 12 delegations at 5 minutes each. There's sort of an unlimited, other than the 5 minutes and other than the 11 p.m. at night. If there are that many concerns about a project or things that we need to hear from the public, I think giving out that, that access and hearing those thoughts in 5-minute intervals from, again, up to a large number of delegations from the public sort of balances out. It's not like we're hearing from the applicant for 15 minutes and then only hearing one delegation for 5. Again, we could hear 12, we could hear 15. And we've seen that. So I guess I would say that I don't have an issue with the recommendations as the way they are. I think they represent a good balance, as Councillor Fenning said. I think the 5 minutes is reasonable. It allows for some organization or no organization at all. If everyone wants to just share their own 5 minutes, and we hear the same thing repeatedly, and that helps us understand it. There's a lot of people thinking that way. I think that's good, and I think the 15 is already a restriction on the applicant, and I think it's a good step forward. So I'm good with the recommendation as contained in the staff report.
Okay, thank you, Councilor Gerber. And I think we're having a great conversation here, and this is great. And for the most part, when delegations come, and when we're talking about whether it's a plan of subdivision or anything else, generally speaking, delegations have already submitted in writing their concerns, and the applicants are usually responding to those concerns for whatever, but then the delegations usually come and kind of repeat to us. But in the staff report, we get copies of the written or emails that come from the people who are delegating or have concerns about what is in, and staff put those right in their reports. So we do get a copy of those even before the meeting. And as far as special meetings, we've done that in the past. I know we set up, had a special council meeting at the community center in St. Agatha. When we were talking about the water and stuff, we had a special meeting up there so we could accommodate the people up there, and we were fortunate that we used that space because there was an awful lot of people that wouldn't have fit in down here. So we've done that before. So these are things that have been working, and I think that with the recommendations that they are working, and people do get their opportunity to speak, and we listen. At least I know I listen. I mean, I think we all listen to what the people have to say, and that's why we're here. So we can start. The recommendation is that the report be received for information. And if there is an amendment. All righty. The clerk is going to share the screen so we can see what the recommendation is. Unfortunately, I just heard a from across the room trying to figure out what we're doing here, so.
My apologies. I am not a natural at this screen sharing. There it is. Okay. That one. There. So let's get rid of this here. This is okay. Okay, so this is what I have taken from our conversation. So the original part being that it be received for information, that the bylaw be amended. Sorry, to replace the applicant time, because I would just like to note that because of the backwards way that we kind of did the fact that I didn't highlight my report right away, we went straight to the delegation. At this moment in time, nobody has moved or seconded this actual recommendation at this point in time. So we haven't had a mover or a seconder. So we're sort of a little bit off proper procedure at this moment in time. So anyways, to replace the applicant time allotment from 15 minutes to 10 minutes. And then again, that the bylaw be amended to include the following. So we would add a section 7, that any reference to 5 minutes, that to a 5-minute time limit for delegations found in the procedural bylaw be amended to read 7 minutes. And then of course that things are renumbered accordingly because we are adding a section. So as I said, we're a little bit off procedure here. The proper thing to do would be for the original motion to be moved and seconded, or somebody to move the amendment be voted on, and then to vote on the main motion.
Can we say that I haven't finished reading the recommendation and continue? How's that?
I feel the way I have laid it out perhaps is the easiest way to do it, if you don't mind, sir.
Okay.
Thank you.
So we need a mover and a seconder for the to be received for information. That is Councillor Gerber, Councillor Gordick.
And now if somebody wants to move the amendment.
And if could it be a friendly amendment?
I would say to move the.
Mr. Mayor, I could move it if that would help.
You want to move the amendment there, Councillor
Sure.
Fisher, and that'll be seconded by Councillor
to second
Fenning.
that.
Councillor Fenning, yeah. So now we're voting on the amendment. Oh, Councillor Gerber, you have a comment or?
Yeah, I'm just checking, do we not have to, if there's not a friendly amendment, do we not have to defeat the original motion before we vote on the amended motion, or?
No, actually, it's we're voting on whether or not to amend the main motion, and then we vote on the amended main motion.
So it's on the floor, but now we have the amendment, which we will vote on the amendment, and then the main motion, which this will become part of it then. Okay. So we have a mover and a seconder for the Councillor Gerber.
Yeah, sorry, through you, Your Worship. So right now we're just voting on whether we're going to entertain an amendment, and then we're going to actually.
What we're doing, Councillor Gerber, is we're just voting to see if everyone is in favor of amending the motion.
In general.
Yep.
Yeah.
Okay, so we have a mover and seconder for the amendment, and all in favor? That is carried. Now we are voting on the main recommendation, which includes the amendment.
Mhm.
And we have a mover and a seconder for that, right?
Yes.
Yes. So all in favor of that?
Sorry, point of order, Mr. Mayor.
Yes.
Councillor Gerber was asking whether we were voting on whether to accept any amendment, but it's not just that we're accepting any amendment, but that amendment is what we see on the screen in front of us. So we just voted on the specific amendment that is on the screen in front of us right now. And I can't see Councillor Gerber, but on my screen because of the screen share at the moment. But his question was different than what was happening. And I want to be sure that we're clear on what's happening.
Okay, so my apologies if I misunderstood Councillor Gerber's question. So yes, what was being voted on is Councillor Fisher made a motion to add this to the motion. Okay. So if we want to, for clarity, if I'm at a loss as to the right way to deal with this, but if council just wants to affirm that that is what they were voting in favor of, is the addition of this.
So Councillor Gerber, you understood that that's what we're doing was voting on the amendment to be added to the original recommendation.
My thoughts would have been that we had a motion on the floor and that we wouldn't be considering an amendment to the motion until the original motion was defeated, unless it was a friendly amendment. There wasn't a friendly amendment. I mean, I see where it's going and that's fine with me, but I just don't think we've got there the way that we were supposed to get there.
Ms. Chambers, did you want to?
Yeah, I'm just wondering if Ms. Middleholtz could clarify and read what the main motion was, just so council is aware. Because I think we've got not the main motion shown before us. Is that correct?
Thank you. So what the main or the original motion was that report number ILS 2021-40 be received for information.
Right.
That was the original motion.
Right.
And so that was moved and seconded. So in parliamentary procedures, if somebody moves to amend the main motion, what they are essentially putting forth, what Councillor Fisher put forward here, is that he wanted to add the following, which is what was highlighted there. That was moved by Councillor Fisher, seconded by Councillor Fenning, and then voted on. So once that has happened, that council has approved. So once a motion, a main motion is moved and seconded, council now owns the motion. Okay, so council owns it. And so now council has to vote to approve an amendment to that motion. I'm sorry, Mayor Armstrong, would you mind muting yourself? I hear an echo. Thank you, sir. So then through doing that, the main motion is now officially properly amended, and council can proceed to vote on the main motion.
Thank you.
Does that make sense? Okay.
You're muted, Chair.
Yes. Yes, okay, thank you.
And I'm muted. Okay. I see hands have dropped, so I'm assuming everybody has understanding now where we're at. That we're now voting on the main motion as it's amended. Okay. So all in favor? Opposed? So we have one opposed. Carried as amended. Cool. Okay, so next is the correspondence. We have two items and the recommendation that correspondence items number 13.1 and 13.2 be received for information. And that is moved by Councillor Gordick, seconded by Councillor Fisher. All in favor? That is carried. Thank you.
The way the bylaw will be is that bylaw number 2021-50 as amended.
Be introduced. Okay. So the next recommendation is that bylaw number 2021-50 be introduced as amended, ready first, second, and third time, and finally passed in open council. That is moved by Councillor Hallman, Councillor Gordick. All in favor? That is carried. Thank you. There any notice of motion? No notice of motions. Announcements. Councillor Hallman.
Thank you, through the mayor. This is Veterans Day for Indigenous people, and I hope people will take time to go and visit the cenotaph in New Hamburg, as there was a wreath laid by an Indigenous community member today. It's quite lovely, so I hope you'll take that in. Followed by on Thursday is Remembrance Day for everyone on Turtle Island in Canada, and I hope people will join and it's safely with masks and socially distance. Obviously, the mayor is laying the wreath for Wilmot Township, and we'll have the great honor of standing alongside an Indigenous veteran who is served for armed forces to be laying a wreath for the first time in the community. So I hope people will attend and watch this amazing act of reconciliation happening in our community. I also wanted to thank everyone for attending New Dundee on Saturday for the Remembrance Day event there. It was very magical, as it was, there was a, maybe Mayor Armstrong can comment on the airplane. It's not my expertise as to what type of plane that was, but it was quite an emotional moment when there was reenactments happening and a older aircraft flew over at a remarkable time. It was very meaningful for everyone there. And so I just wanted to comment on thanking everyone for that. And I also wanted to take this opportunity to thank Mayor Armstrong for his service for Turtle Island in Canada, as he is a veteran. And as we look at that this coming week, I want you to know for my sincere thanks for your time for serving, obviously not just as a politician, but more importantly for Turtle Island and your country, Canada. So thank you, Mayor Armstrong.
Thank you. It was been my pleasure. Absolutely. Councillor Fenning.
Thank you. I had an absolute blast planting trees on Saturday, and it was great to see everybody out from the community and council members as well. The Mike Scout wetlands are going to be an incredible addition to our community, and it's just so amazing to be able to be part of building it. I also want to say a really big thank you to staff from the corporate leadership team that have supported. Last week was Treaty Week, and in supporting the Indigenous community, both with communications and with navigating the zoning bylaw to enable Indigenous projects to happen on farmland around the community. That is a huge step forward. I know, around here it's not very common, but out in Saskatchewan, they have what's called the Treaty Land Sharing Network. And I hope that we can build something like that here in Ontario as well. So I just want to say thank you very much to our corporate leadership team for supporting that.
Thank you. And Councillor Hallman, I'm not sure if that plane was just a Harvard aircraft or a Spitfire. I'm not sure, but it was certainly loud enough. Fortunately, he wasn't low enough to see any markings, but he was definitely well appreciated, that's for sure. And the reenactors, two fellows dressed as soldiers from the War of 1812, and one gentleman was dressed as a soldier from World War I, and they fired off 3 rounds from their muskets, and it was really, really kind of cool. I really appreciated their presence. Well, I have an announcement. I said that this past Friday, the 5th, we hosted our yearly Counsel for a Day experience. Although we only had 2 young folks, Chloe Frank and Athena Koshi, send in their request to participate. They came armed with excitement and enthusiasm. Because of circumstances, we had a rather condensed version of what the day would have offered otherwise, which included a visit to the mayor's office, which I don't know how they find that exciting, but they do, and a chance to question me on a few things. Next, we moved into the council chambers for a photo op on the mayor's chair. They asked many questions and got thoughts, and good thoughts were shared during the time. And thanks to Raj for the many good moments were captured by her prized photography. They were also taken on a guided tour of the main floor of Castle Kilbride. Their visit with us climaxed back in my office where more photos were taken. And as I explained to them, I only charge $5 a photo, so they're okay. They were happy with that. And they were presented with a gift package courtesy of the WRC, Castle Kilbride, and the Township office, which put together by Ms. Bender, and she did such a fabulous job with those packages were pretty full of stuff, so they're going to have a good time in the township. So their submissions are in your mailboxes, and you'll be able to read them and appreciate the hard work they put into doing this. So, and I thank the deputy clerk for her contribution to putting that together. So thank you very much.
Mr. Mayor, did they get to visit the candy bowl at your desk?
They were there, but their parents were with them too, so they had to be. They had to be controlled. So, okay. There are no more announcements. And we need a confirmatory bylaw. A recommendation that bylaw number 2021-50 to confirm the proceedings of council at its meeting held on November 8, 2021 be introduced and read a first, second, and third time and finally passed in open council. That is moved by Councillor Hallman, Councillor Fenning. All in favor? That is carried. And the final recommendation that we do now adjourn to meet again at the call of the mayor. That is moved by Councillor Gerber, Councillor Hallman. All in favor? Only one hand required. Thank you. That's it. There, it's carried. Good night, everyone.